The night before her wedding, Natalie had let her guard down. After celebrating her bachelorette party, she had one too many drinks. Natalie had always intended to remain till her wedding night, but in a haze of emotions and desire, she spent the wildest night with her fiancé, Nick. For a fleeting moment, she had abandoned her resolve, surrendering to passion. The next morning, a loud, frantic knock jolted her awake. Disoriented, she struggled to piece together the fragments of the night before. The banging grew louder, and her heart sank when she recognized Nick's voice calling out to her. His tone was accusatory, his words sharp and biting as he demanded answers. Natalie's confusion deepened. How could Nick, the man she had shared such an intimate moment with, now be standing there angry and betrayed? Had she done something wrong? Was it even her room she had returned to? Or was it someone else's? Before she could process his reaction, the next problem stood before Natalie, her father. He condemned her, speaking of disgrace and shame, leaving her drowning in guilt. What was meant to be the happiest day of her life had unraveled into a storm of humiliation and heartbreak. "Pack your things. You're no longer welcome here," her father said. Natalie's world crumbled. The people she loved most, her father, Nick, were abandoning her. She turned to Cheryl, her stepsister, desperate for understanding. But Cheryl's expression was smug, and her words cut deeper than any betrayal. "I believe you, Natalie," she said sweetly, "because I set you up." Natalie froze, her mind struggling to process Cheryl's confession. "What are you talking about?" she whispered. Cheryl's smirk widened. "It was easy. While we were celebrating, I slipped sleeping pills into your drink. Then I took you to someone else's room and told you Nick was waiting for you. You didn't even notice." "Why would you do this?" Natalie asked, her voice trembling. Cheryl leaned in closer. "Because I love Nick, and I couldn't stand the thought of you being happy with him." Natalie's father, instead of defending her, sided with Cheryl. He said to Natalie, "You're no longer my daughter." Hours later, Natalie found herself at the airport, her father's final words echoing in her mind. Her entire life had unraveled in a single morning. The betrayal, the shame, and the heartbreak swirled in her mind as she clutched her suitcase. She glanced at her ticket, realizing she had nowhere to go. As the reality of her situation set in, Natalie placed a protective hand over her abdomen. It was then she suspected the truth. A small life might now depend on her. The thought was both terrifying and grounding. Determined not to let Cheryl's malice define her future, Natalie boarded the plane with a silent vow to start anew, no matter how difficult it would be. 9 years later, Natalie's life was vastly different. She had built a quiet existence in a foreign country, raising her son Liam on her own. Despite the hardships, she found joy in his laughter and strength in his resilience. Liam, now 8 years old, was a curious and spirited child. His bright smile often reminded Natalie of the man she had never seen again, the stranger from that fateful night. She'd kept the truth about his father from him, unsure how to explain the circumstances. But everything changed when her phone buzzed with an unexpected call. Her father's voice on the other end startled her. "Come home, Natalie. It's urgent," he said, without elaborating. Reluctantly, Natalie purchased tickets for the first flight home. Though she wasn't ready to confront the ghosts of her past, something told her she couldn't avoid them any longer. At the airport, Natalie and Liam hurried to catch their flight. As they reached the gate, a commotion broke out. "I don't pay for first-class tickets to listen to screaming children," snapped a sharply dressed man at the counter. Natalie turned to face the source of the voice, Bryce, a tall, commanding man with piercing eyes and an air of authority. He was visibly irritated by the presence of children in first class. "Excuse me," Natalie said firmly. "My child isn't loud, and he has every right to be here." Bryce glanced at Liam, who stood defiantly beside his mother. Despite his frustration, Bryce was taken aback by Natalie's assertiveness. It was rare for anyone to stand up to him, and though he didn't recognize her, something about her demeanor intrigued him. As Natalie and Liam were moving, Liam whispered, "Mom, he has the same scar as me," pointing to a faint mark on the man's arm. Natalie dismissed it as a coincidence. "Don't say things like that, Liam. It's not polite," she chided gently. But Liam wasn't convinced. "Mom, I think he's my dad," he announced loudly enough for the man to hear. Bryce turned his head, his brows furrowed in confusion. "What did you say, kid?" Natalie's cheeks burned with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly. He has an overactive imagination. Bryce studied her face for a moment before dismissing the interaction. Still, a flicker of familiarity lingered in his expression, though he couldn't place it. After landing as Natalie exited the airport, her heart sank. She recognized the two figures standing near a sleek car, waiting for her. Cheryl, her half-sister, was impeccably dressed, flashing an insincere smile, while Nick, her former fiancé, stood stiffly beside her. "Natalie, finally, we've been waiting for you!" Cheryl called out, her voice dripping with faux enthusiasm. Natalie plastered a neutral expression on her face, gripping Liam's hand tightly. "Hi," she said curtly, avoiding direct eye contact. Before she could say anything else, a commotion erupted. A wallet slipped from Nick's pocket as she passed by. Liam noticed it immediately and dashed forward to pick it up. "Sir, you forgot your wallet," Liam said, holding it out. Cheryl's sharp voice interrupted. "Did it fall out, or maybe your son pulled it out?" she sneered. Natalie's face flushed with anger. Liam would never take something that wasn't his. He's just giving it back. Cheryl smirked. "Oh, so this is your son? Mother of God, I can't believe it. Who would have agreed to—" "Cheryl, enough!" Natalie snapped, her voice trembling with fury. Nick stepped in, his tone condescending. "So, Natalie, you gave birth after— Well, you know, that's just pathetic. And raising him alone? No wonder he's picking pockets." Natalie's composure cracked. She stepped forward and slapped Nick, the sound echoing across the terminal. "If you say something like that again, you'll get another one," Natalie said, her voice firm. Nick stepped closer, his expression dark. "How dare you? Do you think I'll let this go just because you're a woman?" Before Nick could get any closer, Liam jumped between them. "Don't touch my mom!" he shouted, his small fists clenched. Nick scoffed. "Your mother's choices are why you don't have a father." At that moment, Bryce reappeared. "Darling, there you are. I've been looking for you everywhere," he said loudly, placing a protective arm around Natalie's shoulder. Natalie froze, her heart pounding in confusion. Bryce continued, "I was getting worried. Should we find some ice cream for Liam?" Nick and Cheryl stared, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and confusion. "Wait, who is this?" Cheryl asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. Bryce smiled, ignoring the question. "Honey, are these your friends?" he asked Natalie. Natalie seized the opportunity. "No, I don't know these people. They were just asking for money for the subway." Bryce smirked. "Well, sorry to disappoint, but I'm fresh out of cash. Let's go, sweetheart." As they walked away, Liam tugged on Bryce's sleeve. "Why did you help us?" Bryce smiled down at him. "Sometimes, kid, you just have to stand up to bad people." Liam grinned, but his curiosity lingered. "Mom, why can't I call him Dad? It's the truth." Natalie stiffened, her grip on Liam tightening. "Liam, enough," she said firmly. Bryce, sensing the tension, tried to lighten the mood. "Kid, to have a baby with a woman, at least she needs to be attractive," he joked. Natalie's face burned with anger. "Stop the car," she demanded. Bryce looked at her in confusion. "What's wrong? Are you mad at me?" Natalie opened the door. "Liam and I are leaving. Thank you for your help, but I hope we never see you again." Bryce tried to protest, but Natalie's glare silenced him. She handed him money for the ride and stepped out with Liam. Bryce watched them go. Taking a taxi, Natalie directed the driver to her grandmother's house. As they arrived, the sight of the cozy home filled her with a sense of relief. "Natalie, is it really you?" her grandmother exclaimed, pulling her into a warm hug. "Yes, Granny. I missed you so much," Natalie said, her voice thick with emotion. "And who's this handsome young man?" her grandmother asked, smiling down at Liam. "I'm Liam," he said proudly. Her grandmother beamed. "He's perfect, Natalie." For the first time in years, Natalie felt a sense of peace. Her grandmother didn't pry or judge, simply accepting Liam with open arms. It was a stark contrast to the hostility she had just faced, but the peace was short-lived. That evening, a knock at the door disrupted the calm. Natalie opened it to find Cheryl and Nick standing on the porch. "What do you want?" Natalie asked sharply. Cheryl smirked. "Dad wants to see you, right away." Reluctantly, Natalie agreed, her heart heavy as they headed to the family mansion. Upon arriving, the house looked the same, but the people inside felt like strangers. Her father greeted her coldly. Natalie, I sent you away to think about your behavior, and now you bring this child here? Liam stepped forward bravely. Hello, I'm Liam. Her father's face darkened. I will never accept him as part of this family, he said sternly. Natalie's resolve hardened. I didn't come here for your approval. I came for the engagement party and will leave as soon as it's over. Her father scoffed. Fine, but he will not attend. I forbid you to embarrass this family. Natalie's eyes blazed with fury. Goodbye then. As she turned to leave, her father's voice stopped her. Natalie, wait. What will Natalie do now? Will she stand her ground against her father's cold rejection, or will she find a way to reclaim her dignity? Will Bryce's unexpected interventions play a larger role in her life, or will their paths diverge forever?
Hey, I'm Natalie. If you're wondering what happens next, download the Pocket FM app now and listen to the exciting episodes of The Return.